This is one of my new favorite death battle episodes. Ever. Period. No discussion. Every single expectation that I had for this episode was met and exceeded to an amazing degree. I was admittedly really worried that they weren't going to be able to live up to the hype of the first episode, but much like Goku Super Saiyan 3, they went even further beyond with what I was expecting they'd do, and the results honestly speak for themselves. The rundowns were exactly what I wanted. Not only do they cover their stories fairly well, covering every basis and going into more obscure things and also clarifying what versions of both characters they were using, but also the history of their conception, their creations, and the inspirations for their, creation, and the legacy that they've created for themselves. This episode does such a good job of mixing the two rundowns of the previous Goku vs. Supermans, while also somehow being able to remain fairly well paced. With two characters with such vast histories as these two, and needing to not only cover their stories but their feats as well, that can be really tough. Because when you're doing a matchup like this, when you know people are going to call you out for missing something or not doing enough research, you want to bring out all the stops. And also, for Superman's side of the rundown, I really like how they emphasize the good-hearted nature of the character and the smaller things that he does that makes him such a great character. To go on a smaller tangent, Superman has become quickly one of my favorite comic book characters in the last few months, and it's kind of a shame to see him fall out of favor in the public limelight. I guess in a world that's become so jaded and apathetic, people aren't really interested in seeing a good-hearted, pure character like Superman is anymore, which is why characters like Homelander and Omni-Man have become so popular in the last few years. People are more interested in seeing the character's image twisted and tainted because I guess having a character that's pure of heart and a complete Boy Scout is boring, which in my opinion, and this is completely subjective, shows a real lack of knowledge in both character writing as a whole and Superman as a character. So I'm glad this rundown took the necessary time to highlight the aspects of Superman that actually make him Superman. But yeah, besides that, amazing rundowns, absolutely loved them. Love the little callbacks that they had to the previous rundowns from the last two Goku vs. Supermans. And alright, let's move on to the fight. Alright, fight time, and full disclosure, this is the closest this show has gotten to reaching the adrenaline rush that I felt while watching Power Rangers vs. Voltron for the first time. Everything about this fight is done to perfection. From the high-paced action, absolutely gorgeous visuals, phenomenal voice acting, and great sense of scale, they could not have done this fight any better in my opinion. Taking the fight piece by piece, the visuals are absolutely spectacular. I had praised Friezatron earlier this season for being the prettiest episode when it came to its lighting, but this episode takes it to another level. From the absolutely gorgeous effects for all of Goku's Ki Blast, to all of the reality shattering towards the middle and end, to the breathtaking effects used during the climax of the fight, this is genuinely some of the best visuals Death Battle has ever seen, and so much of it just blew me away. The sound aspects of this fight were also amazing. While I was initially disappointed that Moscow X and Just Some Random Guy weren't reprising their roles as Goku and Superman respectively, I was happy to see Michael Kovac come back as Goku after his performance in Gogeta vs. Vegito, because I really liked his Goku in that, even though it might have been a bit too high-pitched for what I want in a regular Goku impression. Putting that aside though, he knocks it out of the park in this fight. He gets to stretch his vocal range a lot more compared to before, mainly because he's not being overlapped with Lenny's Vegeta, so we can actually hear him by himself. He gets off Goku's carefree attitude quite well, and gets to do a lot of great action lines, including two Kamehamehas. The first one was pretty low in scale, which made sense given the context, but the second one, we'll get to that. Xander Mobus also really caught me off guard with his Superman. He definitely wouldn't have been my first pick when it came to casting a Superman, but he frankly surprised me with how good it was. It's the exact kind of tone and temperament that I would expect from the character, and Xander does a great job capturing that. He gets some really great lines later on, and the track is honestly perfect. It's the exact kind of energy that I would want from this fight. Brandon kills it on the vocals as per usual, though sometimes it is kind of hard to understand what the lyrics are, because the music's so loud, but it's not a big deal. And the climax of it all, combined with the reference to Alive, gave me actual goosebumps upon my first independent listen. The fight itself is just full of fun moments. Overall, the pacing and action of the fight are done really well. It's all very fast-paced and has a great level of adrenaline to it. It keeps that pace from Vegeta vs. Thor that I loved so much, and turns it up to 11, basically. There's also so many great dynamic angles of movements of the characters that seem very reminiscent of All Might vs. Might Guy. Like the way Goku slides along the ground at the beginning, the way he dragon throws Superman, the way the camera follows Superman as he crashes into the ground and recovers. This episode is the most well-shot fight since the previously mentioned All Might vs. Might Guy, and I mean that. all the actions are just full of character and expression, and it's all great. One thing that they also did that I really loved was that they paced out Goku's transformations fairly well. As much as I wasn't a fan of them already starting out in the middle of a fight, which is something they've gotten used to doing, which is not a good thing, I think it was a good call to have Goku start out in regular Super Saiyan, then go Super Saiyan Blue later and keep him in Blue for most of the fight. Obviously, they weren't going to cover every single form like they did with the first one, mainly because Goku has way too many forms to cover now in just one 4-minute fight, and the pacing probably would have been even weirder with him jumping through forms every several seconds. So, instead, they've just focused on the important ones like Super Saiyan Blue, and Ultra Instinct. Honestly, dude, I wished Vegeta vs. Thor was paced as well as this was, because it feels like with every Dragon Ball episode that comes out after Vegeta vs. Thor, it just does everything that that episode did, but better. And that's really unfortunate. There's a lot of great references to both of their series throughout the fight as well, both with their actions and in their dialogue. The clash at the beginning referencing Dragon Ball FighterZ, the previously mentioned Dragon Throw, the 1-inch punch from Resurrection F, Superman referencing his speech to Darkseid and JLU, which genuinely made me so happy they referenced that because I love that speech. There's also a line he says later when he said his mom made a suit for him, which is apparently a reference to an older Superman comic, which I didn't know, but it's cool that they snuck that in there anyway. And then there's this shot where Goku does that UI move that he used on Jiren that people keep spamming in fighters, it's really annoying, as well as a Man of Steel reference shortly after. And I like how they kind of subverted that little 2-punch thing from Man of Steel, because they've done that twice, one with Goku vs. Superman 2, and a second time with Lex vs. Doom. So I'm glad that they like subverted it a bit, where like he doesn't get the second punch off and Goku just blocks it and counters. I thought that was neat. All of these references are just very clear that there was so much love that was put into this fight, and they went above and beyond with it. It's just so clear to see. There's so many great character moments as well, like Superman fighting Goku's excited and carefree nature endearing, Superman only deciding to go all out when Goku tells him there's a way that it can all be undone. The way Goku was moving as he goes in for the 1-inch punch indicates that he briefly tapped into Ultra Instinct, or at least was able to use its power briefly, like they established in the rundown when they said that Goku has the ability to implement Ultra Instinct into his other forms. And Goku complimenting Superman's suit. Though I'm not really sure I'm a fan of Goku cutting off Superman's response with trying to get in some cheap shots, but I'm not too big on it. I thought it was funny. And there was also a lot more character moments in the finale, but we'll get to that. I want to dedicate a whole section to this specific part where Superman starts punching Goku so hard we get glimpses of other realities, because, oh my god, this scene is great and has its own separate layers to go over. Not only is it a callback to when Superman punched Brainiac so hard that every version of him felt it across every universe, but the different references that these glimpses hold are such a treat. You first have GT Goku versus Blue Superman. Yep, that's his name and that's a thing. With GT Goku being voiced by the one and only Masako X, making a brief cameo. The second one is Goku Black fighting Ultraman, with Ultraman being voiced by just some random guy, also making a cameo. And I also like the added detail of them fighting in heaven, because the last time we saw Goku Black in Death Battle, well, it didn't end well for him. And lastly, Xeno Goku versus Cosmic Armor Superman. There's no dialogue for this part, but just that shot of Cosmic Armor Superman domineering over Xeno Goku as he charges up a Kamehameha is truly amazing. Alright, now we're at the finale, which this might be my favorite climax of a specific episode, minus Power Rangers vs. Voltron, and even then, it's still pretty close. After an insanely good rush of attacks between UI Goku and Superman, Superman decides to actually use the Super Flare, which is something he did not do in the second version of this fight, even though that was highlighted in that episode's rundown. Anyways, Goku avoids it, and Superman is drained of energy. He starts flying through a bunch of different suns, and we get two amazing back-to-back shots. One of Superman flying through a bunch of different stars, and also curiously contrasting the shot from Hulk vs. Broly, and after that we get Goku standing defiantly as Superman's power becomes so much that it begins to light up the sky in a little fiery ball. Goku saying finally here can be taken two different ways for me. Either he's saying finally someone I can go all out with, or finally he's giving me his all. I think either one works and I like them both, but either way, this scene kind of reminded me of the scene from Saitama vs. Popeye in a weird way. Though it was much briefer and not a whole speech like that episode, it still kind of gave off that similar vibe. Anyways, Goku begins to charge a Kamehameha, and Superman starts charging straight into the earth. Very reminiscent of how the original fight ended. Michael didn't really go all out with his earlier Kamehameha, which made sense considering, again, the context of the Kamehameha and the scale, but he goes all out with this one in what I think might be one of the best Kamehameha deliveries in the entire series, though I don't think it's quite to the level of Lanny's final flash from Vegeta vs. Thor. And the following shot of the blast firing from the earth is absolutely breathtaking. And when Superman starts charging through, Goku decides, you know what? Screw it. And goes Kaioken times God knows how much and freaking destroys the earth with just how much power he's outputting. Does it make any sense? Absolutely not. But it's so freaking cool, so who cares? The following shot of Goku's blast destroying the earth with just how strong he is at this moment is so monumental that it makes Vegeta and Trunks' final flash and Aquaman's whirlpool look like squirt guns in comparison to a waterfall. And it just looks so gorgeous, dude. It looks so pretty. This episode would not be nearly as visually breathtaking if not for the VizPost team. So, hats off to y'all. You guys really made this episode what it is, I feel. And it's still not done! When Superman still pushes through Goku's Kamehameha, Goku summons his UI avatar for one last attack, and the clash of their punches literally shatters reality harder than Hulk vs. Broly ever did. And then, the silence. Goku wakes up, and for a minute I actually thought he had done it, but it pans up to reveal his halo, which, while I think everyone saw this coming, I appreciated the fake out. And this scene, I don't really think there's words that can describe the emotion that this scene makes me feel. I like how nonchalant Goku is about losing. I liked how Superman gave Goku credit for pushing him as far as he did, and that he actually really enjoyed himself. And Goku's promise of getting stronger, and Superman saying he looks forward to it, all is just great. And then the fist bump. This could not have ended any better. It feels like the perfect tribute to both characters, and the way both combatants end on good terms is just really wholesome and heartwarming. And all the different realities that we see and all the references that they hold is also a really cool thing to see. This fight is darn near perfect. It not only pays respect to both characters and their legacies, but delivers to us a pulse-pounding, action-packed fight full of character, homages, and climax. The way this fight culminates, both with the action-packed clash and the character moments after, made me feel like this was the culmination of all of Death Battle's work up until now. And truth be told, if the series ended here, I would have been completely satisfied. Obviously, that was never going to be the case, especially since we have one more episode left after this episode, and Death Battle will still be going for many more years, I'm sure. But this episode just felt very final. The conclusion was nice. I liked how they split up the verdict into different categories and explaining the advantages and disadvantages both characters had, and I liked how they moved away from that and moved more into the general history and public mindset about this matchup, and questioning if it's really a bad thing that they're doing what they're doing. But I like that Boomstick slaps Wiz out of his crisis, literally, and gives him a, frankly, really wholesome and emotional reminder that they're just doing this because it's fun. And while it is a great moment, it did put something in perspective for me. Death Battle is a show that means a lot to me. I'm not going to try and lie to you guys by saying that it saved my life or it cured my mom from cancer or anything like that, but this is a show that's had a pretty big impact on my life. And I think this episode, specifically that ending, reminded me why. In a community that's so filled with toxic debates about who would win between characters, I think a lot of people get too caught up in that aspect of the actual debate aspect of the versus community that they forget about the main reason people do it in the first place. It's just for fun. It's fun to put two characters that would never meet otherwise into a hypothetical fight and discuss who would win. It's fun to imagine how a fight between two characters would go, coming up with ways their arsenals could bounce off of each other and interactions they may have. It's a way of expressing our love for these series we've grown up with. It's a way of letting our creativity run free, coming up with matchups and fight ideas for said matchups. And Death Battle is just a way of bringing those ideas to life. It's a love letter to all the franchises that they featured on the show, and throughout all the debates and controversy with some of their verdicts, I think that is a beautiful thing. I know this show has their fair share of haters, and that's totally fine, everyone has their own tastes, but for me personally, this is a show that means a whole lot to me, and this episode kind of reminded me why. This, perhaps more than even the original, felt like a true love letter to both franchises and the characters. Watching this, I truly felt like a little kid watching Power Rangers vs. Voltron again. And I think, more so than any other episode, is something truly magical. I know I've given multiple episodes this season a 10 out of 10 ranking, kind of to the point where it's losing its meaning, but this episode, perhaps even more than Scooby vs. Courage, is a true 10 out of 10 in every way imaginable. I love this episode so much, and for those of you who haven't watched it, please do yourself a favor and do it. It's an experience you won't soon forget. Also, oh my god! Galactus vs. Unicron, come home, brother!